Hey guys, and welcome back to the channel. My name is Ari, and in today's video I want to talk a little bit about my story, my life experience, and kind of how I got here. I did a little bit of this in a previous video, but it was one of the the voiceover videos, so I wanted to do a little bit more where it was me actually just discussing my life and how I've gotten to this point. So hopefully you'll stick around and listen. Okay guys, welcome back. So for starters, let's talk a little bit about where I came from. I was born in a tiny little southern town. I'm not going to say the state right now. One of these days I will, but there are still people who don't know, so I'm not going to go there. But, it was a tiny little conservative southern town. I was raised in the church. I actually had a lot of involvement in church and even did some work in children's ministry and was very involved, and my faith was a major aspect of my growing up. But from a really early age, I sort of felt out of sorts. And I was an only child, so I didn't really have anything to compare it to. It wasn't like I had that sister to be like, okay, that's what's going on. I had, women in my life and younger, with my aunts and cousins and all of that, but I still didn't really understand what it was that was going on. And one of my first real memories of that, I guess the word would be dysphoria, was when I got my first haircut. So when I was younger, I was allowed to grow my hair out. That was, I lived in a despite our area, my family was incredibly accepting of things not fitting, I guess you'd call it, atypical gender norms. So, I had Barbie dolls, and, if I wanted it and that was something that I liked, then I would get it for Christmas. And She-Ra was one of my favorite shows, and I had all the figurines for that, which I really wish I still had because they'd be worth a fair amount of money. And I was allowed to grow my hair out longer. But when it came time for me to start going into school, conventional wisdom kind of held out, and it was time to get that first boy cut. Now, I had been more than a little resistant to the idea of getting a haircut. I had a lot invested in my hair, I think like a lot of us do, really. And I'm going to try to stop saying so keep account for me and see how entertaining that is. We ought to do a game where everybody takes a shot every time I say We'd all be drunk before the end of the video. Anyway, so I had that first haircut, and the way that came about, let me talk about that just a minute, but let me switch up for a moment. If you ever wonder why I slice these together, these videos, it's because my camera has a way of stopping recording. If I do it for too long, it just thinks something is wrong and it cuts off. So I do it in little segments, so we'll end for another segment. Okay, so that first haircut is what we were talking about. We had a family friend who did hair, and what my family did was they waited until I fell asleep, and then they had the hairdresser that was in the family cut my hair off. It was very much so a boy cut. So when I woke up and I saw my hair and I realized what had happened, it was not good. It was kind of crushing, and I did not react well at all, to the point to where, I've had people in my family, like my grandmother, would say that wasn't something she would have done again, if she had the option or knew how terribly I would react to it. So that was one of my first memories, I would say, of some sort of dysphoria moment when things really didn't click. So as life went on, I tried to kind of play the role, but I was always a little bit of a outsider. I wasn't into the typical boy things. I never ever played sports. It just didn't interest me. Every single friend that I had growing up, and even now, Was a girl. I wasn't, I didn't feel any connection. I didn't feel that there was anything in common that I had with guys, so I felt kind of lost when I was around them. So as I got older, I started to question things, and I thought, okay, well, maybe you're just gay, because trans was not even a word I was familiar with. I'm an 80s baby, and I knew nothing in the 80s, 90s, or even early 2000s, very early, about what even the word transgender was. So it wasn't anything that I had any real knowledge of. So I just assumed, okay, you're gay. And that wasn't a whole lot more comforting than being trans. So coming from a very religious background, the idea of being gay was just as scary. So I did a lot of covering. At one point in time, I actually did come out to someone when I was in high school. I had a friend who had come out as gay, and it had raised quite a stir. So I actually had written him a letter telling him, and I gave him the letter, which was amazing, because usually I'm one of those people that can plan things out and then not actually do them. So I actually gave him the letter, and after I gave him the letter, I started to panic. Every nightmare scenario went through my head. It was, what if he tells somebody? What if he is the friend I thought he was, and he says nothing, but he drops the letter somewhere in school, or his parents, who are very religious, find the letter, and then that becomes, them contacting my parents, and everything, goes all to crap. I freaked out. So I actually ended up going to him and asking for the letter back, and it was the same day, I believe. And, then making up the lamest excuse I could possibly think of to try to backtrack and go, oh, well, I'm not actually gay. If I'd only known that was a truthful statement then, but I didn't. And for his part, he was very accepting of it. He had went through the ringer with how he was being treated, in school at the time, and not necessarily, he had lost a lot of friends that we shared in common. So, I just made up an excuse, and he accepted it without question. And not one time, to the best of my knowledge, did he ever tell anyone what had happened. So after that experience, I kind of distanced myself a little bit, and eventually he was actually sent away to a relatively local boarding school. And that was kind of, the final nail in the closet door, I guess you would say, because seeing that, I kind of knew with what had happened to him, I wasn't going to have it happen to me. So I was very determined that, I might be in the closet, but I was going to stay in the closet the rest of my life, because I would not deal with what he had to deal with. So I kept that going for a very long time, actually. So despite my determination that I was going to stay in the closet, it didn't really help me socially. I was not a popular kid in school, for a combination of reasons. I was perceived as the guy, and yet I didn't fit the typical norms. I wasn't involved in sports. I was incredibly thin. I have been my entire life. I was that scrawny kid, a little geeky, a little nerdy, and I got picked on a lot. And even with not coming out of the closet, I still got anti-gay slurs thrown at me on a regular basis. So high school, I don't think it really helped me any being in the closet with the treatment I got, but it was still something I was determined to do. So after I got out of high school, I attempted to, again, continue on with my life. I eventually got back into the church. Before that, though, I was trying to make things work. I wanted to fit into that normal mold. I started dating a girl. You can imagine that didn't go very well. But it wasn't really on her. She wasn't a bad person. we just were really bad together because that wasn't who I was attracted to. So the relationship went downhill. I went into a big depression because, my whole thing was this was the one relationship I thought could work. I thought could be normal. I genuinely liked her. I genuinely cared for her. I just thought a lot about her, and I enjoyed spending time with her. So in my mind, if I couldn't make this work, I couldn't make any relationship work. So that was a very hard pill for me to swallow. At the time, I felt like I was kind of writing off the rest of my life and what it was going to be at that point. So I got back involved in church. I was very active in church. And I did what a lot of people, I think, do when you are hiding something that in your mind and in your upbringing you've kind of been taught is wrong, is sinful, is some terrible thing, and that's lashing out. I was one of the most conservative people that you would want to meet. I very regularly had talked about LGBT issues in a very negative light. And I'll talk about that here in just a moment. But a lot of that was brought in because I was so incredibly closeted, and when you do, you're so afraid that other people will notice. And I had people notice. My high school had been people noticing before I had even came out. So, I was worried that someone was going to... Okay, sorry about that. That was one of the video snafus that I was talking about where it shut itself off, and I didn't even know it. What it was talking about was I was already being outed, so to speak, even before I had came out. So I knew that that was a real threat, a real issue to me. So one of the things you tend to do is you lash out. And, for me, I became that irritating, closeted conservative who it was always about attacking the LGBT community, because the thought was if I bring attention to them, if I make it so that I, who have been seen this way, am constantly saying something on the negative, then no one will put me in the same camp. It's a disgusting way to think, but it's one that happens. And it's also, I think, why 9 times out of 10 we end up with these stories about, a congressman being caught in a public restroom and doing something that he shouldn't be doing. And 9 times out of 10, it is one of the most anti-gay politicians in that state or in that legislative body, because that's the reaction that people sometimes have. Now, thankfully, I was on a lesser scale. I had that ability to, I didn't, impact as much damage. I thought I was tailoring my way of talking about things in such a way that it still came off as compassionate and Christian and, love the whole love the sinner, hate the sin thing, all of this stuff. But no matter how you put it, it was hatred. It was self-hatred. And because I was so miserable, I couldn't stand to see people being content in their life when I thought, this could be me, but no, it's not right. Why are they happy when I'm so miserable? And misery loves company and loves to spread. So that was one of the issues that kind of came up during that time frame when I was involved. And in its own way, at that point, the combination of religion and the closet made me a worse person. It didn't bring out the best in who I was, and I don't think the closet usually does. So as I slowly started understanding a little bit of myself, I found that my position, my thought kind of mellowed with that internalized homophobia, transphobia. It kind of mellowed down. But I still didn't really understand what was going on with me until probably 10 years ago, when I saw a documentary or a news piece, I guess it was for 2020, that had then a very, very, very young transgender youth by the name of Jazz Jennings. And when I saw it and watched the interview and saw them speak to this little girl who managed to put things so simply and at the same time eloquently, with the statement like, one of the things I always remembered was when Jazz said, that she had, a boy body and a girl brain. And it rang so true to me, but I still ran from it for so long. I went on about life. I got myself busy in other things. I never gave myself the opportunity to be happy. And, the thing I've discovered about that type of denial of who you are is it doesn't make things better. What happens, you think you're helping yourself, but it's like tightly latching that lid, onto a boiling pot of water. It doesn't relieve any of the pressure. You're covering it up. You're not seeing it. But the pressure continues to build. And last year, having moved away, I moved away from that small town. I'm still in a small town, but in a different part of the country, here in the Midwest. And I moved away for about 5 years ago. And last year, I felt like things really came to a head. So when I say that things came to a head, it was really like that dysphoria, that discomfort, that feeling of things not being quite right, just continued to build. And, when it came to, 2017, and I'd already started with thoughts in my head. I'd started growing my hair out a little bit in 2016. It is longer than this, but it's curled right now. You can see that, of course. Anyway, 2016, I had things that were really going on. I still wasn't confronting the issue, but I had a lot of dysphoria around facial hair that was causing me a real problem. I've worn makeup for years now, but I would start seeing, shadow come through midday at work, and my day was ruined at that point. I was so uncomfortable. It was all I could think about on the way home. I would immediately get home and shave and then put makeup back over it because I didn't want to see any of that shadowing. I would end up shaving 2 and 3 times a day compulsively. And it's funny that something like that can control your life, but it really started to. And I decided at that time, that was when I started laser, and I started my whole journey slowly accepting who I was and seeing, how I wanted to end this, or to begin what may be the second half of my life. I'm in my 30s, and I started to realize I didn't want to be that elderly person sitting at the end of their life and realizing that I'd never truly given myself the opportunity to be me. It was just, it was too much of a risk to take. With every day, you don't know how much time you have left, and realizing that one day it might be over, and I may have never been me, was more than I could handle. So 2017 was when I started my transition. I'm not going to go into detail about all that. I'm actually going to do a year in review video here in a few minutes, so I'll upload 2 videos. And I'll talk a little bit more about what 2017 brought, and looking ahead to 2018 and all the things I'm excited about. But I really like to review back through 2017, so I hope you'll join me for that video. I'm sure I'll have a link to it at some point as soon as it's put online. But I really want to kind of look back on it, because it makes me feel so much better, even when I have those low moments, to see, okay, I'm not where I want to be, but dear God, I'm not where I was. I've made progress. I've moved forward So we'll do a year in review video here in just a little bit as well, and I'll be posting that. Okay, so winding up this video, I hope you enjoyed hearing a little bit about my story and going a little bit more in detail on what I've went through. Hopefully you'll tune back in and watch the 2017 in review that I plan on putting up today as well. And if you're just visiting the channel for the first time, please take a moment to hit the subscribe button, hit the little bell to be notified when I post new videos. I do try to post weekly. Sometimes I'm a little off on that, all based on what's going on in life. But I do my best to have regular posts on here. I hope they're educational. I hope they show a little bit about what is really going on in my transition and one person's life as a trans woman. I can't represent everybody. Everyone has their own story, but I want to take a moment and I want to be able, through this channel, to tell mine, and maybe it'll highlight what other people have to deal with. So please click subscribe. If you have comments, please make sure to leave those below the video. I do want your ideas, so if you have ideas for videos you'd like to see the channel do, or new things you want to see, just please comment that and let me know, and make sure to subscribe. So anyway, in ending the video, my phrase, and I'm going to continue to use it because it speaks to me, and that is from Kesha, "Don't let the bastards get you down." Of course, there are going to be people who are going to hate you regardless. So be yourself. Be safe. As a trans person, we always have to keep safety at our core and remembering to be safe. But be yourself. Life is way too short to be someone other than you and to be miserable. So yeah, so that's everything. Lots of love, guys, and hopefully I'll see you again at the next video. Bye-bye.